Welcome to the 61st episode of the GameFor Podcast. In this episode, we'll talk about how to become an advocate for tabletop gaming. I'm Adam.
And I'm Matt.
And this is the GameFor Podcast. GameFor is a platform to help connect tabletop gamers and to help you get more out of your tabletop gaming. Matt and I are part of a software development and design company called Milkcan. And because most of the folks at Milkcan love tabletop games, we developed the GameFor app and launched it in early 2018. We launched this companion podcast in June of 2019 to help tabletop gamers get more enjoyment out of their hobby. Due to the COVID-19 global pandemic, we hibernated the GameFor app in July of 2020 and plan to bring back a retooled version of the app for Android, iOS, and web when gaming in person is safer. Until then, we'll keep bringing you this podcast to help you get more out of your tabletop gaming. Oh, I'm a little tired, I gotta be honest with you.
Yeah, you have been on the road again.
Yes, no, that's true.
As one Willie Nelson put.
Sure, yeah, no, well, okay, so what have you been doing? You've been not doing as much, I think.
I have not. I'm finally getting the basement done. Like, the carpet guy comes Friday, so I have, like, a little bit to do, but, like, once I'm done with my stuff this week, like, that's it, I'm done. We have carpet put down this weekend, and I can enjoy my hobby space again because I can clean out stuff. So right now, because of the carpet guy coming and everything else, like, everything had to be completely removed. So, yeah, my hobby space looks like a hoarder's paradise right now. It's a popular Coolio song.
Yeah, no, Hoarder's Paradise is not that one didn't go on the album.
Deep B-side. But yeah, I did stop by one of our local hobby stores and check to see if anything had come in, and they're like, oh, well, you did reserve the Kill Team 2.0 box. I'm like, okay, I couldn't remember if I did or not. So I got that, and actually I got a whole bunch of little goodies and stuff too.
Oh, really? What kind of goodies?
There was like some card sleeves for it.
Oh.
They were like pretty cool looking.
Nice.
Dog tags, which was interesting, and
put them on your dog.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and some pictures. Oh, and then little buttons, like two little buttons, like one for the orcs and one for the Kriegs.
Veteran Guardsmen is what they're
Veteran
technically called.
Okay.
Yeah, Veteran Guardsmen. But yeah, Death Corps of Krieg is what they're known as.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So have you started to build any of it yet? I suppose not, because you've been busy with the basement.
No, it's looking there all nice and shiny. I did open it up and flip through the books and
Nice.
all that stuff, and was like, oh, wow, look at all the pieces.
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces in there. That's true. And they've announced, let's see, while I was at Gen Con, they announced a new starter box, which is basically the same thing as this current box, but with basically the same armies, but with slightly less terrain.
Yeah, different terrain. Yeah.
Well, no, it's not different. It's the same terrain, but it is, instead of the bigger pieces that make up, like, that you have to put together. That
from the original Kill Team box.
No.
Because this Kill Team box is very orky.
Yeah, and the new one's going to have orc stuff in it too, just not as much of the orc stuff. It's going to have all the pieces that are built that you don't have to build.
Oh, because I just saw like the pieces that were like the cathedral, like
that's going to be in the one for Tau and Sisters of Battle.
Oh, I thought that's what you were talking about.
No. They released they announced two new boxes. So there's a new box that's got the orcs and the Krieg in it, and less terrain, and also not the book. I don't know why either. I'm not. Also the little barricades. Those little barricades.
Yeah, the barricades aren't bad.
Yeah, but so the little barricades and the pieces of terrain that don't make like a 2-story building, just the like one-piece pieces, and then all the same stuff, and it's going to be cheaper.
Well, I would hope so.
I don't. Well, yeah,
that doesn't. But
I don't
I'm
understand
surprised, kind of.
Yeah, really. Yeah, well. But yeah, then and then sometime in next quarter or so, October, coming soon, whatever, I'm assuming, they're going to then release this new box, which is going to have Tau and Sisters of Battle in it, and that will have terrain like the 2018 version.
Right.
Not as much of it, but it's the same type of buildings.
I did see the 2018 box, like that original box, is for sale at our... Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because they had the other two, and then because I saw that, I'm like, wait, what? And I'm like, I went and looked at them, like,
it wasn't Rogue Trader?
No, it was the original.
Oh wow, jeez.
And I was like, I haven't seen that since
for a long time now, since about 2018.
I want to say it was 160 or 180. It wasn't badly priced.
Yeah,
really.
that's roughly. Well, I don't remember what the original price was on it. Maybe it was less than 150, but I don't remember.
I think the original was like 120 or 140. It wasn't. It was like
it was
crazily good.
It was stupid cheap. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Oh, kill team things. Anyway, yeah. Well, that's cool. So you're hoping that at least by this weekend you can start moving stuff back out, to get things out of your hobby room, and
right. And then I'll be painting. I've got I walk by some like in process paints and look at them. The only painting I did was I took some of my acrylic matte white that I'm not using anymore because I don't like it. And there were some spots on the ceiling that the construction people had marked up, and I was able to match it.
Oh, nice. That's handy. Yeah.
My wife was like, "Oh," I'm like,
"See, this isn't all for silliness, is it?"
I'm like, "Hey," and I was going to throw it out, and it was useful to use the last bit of the paint in the bottle.
There you go. Absolutely.
But yeah, that was me. But yeah, let's talk to you. You talked about, you kind of mentioned the GC.
Yes, Gen Con. I went to Gen Con. I just got back. Let's see. Today is Wednesday, and I got back on Monday. So I left Wednesday of last week. I got up at 4:30 in the morning, and I drove to Milwaukee. And I hooked up with some friends of mine there and parked my car at a friend's house. And then we took his car out to a park and ride. And then we got into another vehicle, which was a minivan, and it was the whole thing.
It's like trains, planes, and automobiles.
A little bit, yeah. But then we went from Milwaukee to Indianapolis, which is where Gen Con is. It was a very different Gen Con, obviously. We live in different times. They announced shortly after the show that there were 35,000 people there. In the before times, 2018, 2019, they generally surpassed 70,000, so they were at about half capacity. I got to be honest, it felt a little even thinner than that, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
The dealer hall, which is always the big draw, is this huge, massive, giant, room at the Indianapolis Convention Center, whatever.
Yeah.
They did not use all of it. Usually they do.
They usually that and then some.
Yeah, well, that's true too. I mean, but I mean, just for the dealer area,
right?
They usually use this entire giant, massive room, and then you're right. Yeah, then they also use pretty much the rest of the building, and then also the Lucas Oil Stadium where the Colts play,
and hallways and
all kinds of places. Well, this year they did not use Lucas Oil Stadium at all, partially because there was a game on Sunday, so that was a little weird. There was people cosplaying as like anime characters heading one direction, and people cosplaying as football players going the other direction. Which is fine. And so there was that. But the dealer hall was a bit smaller. Also, there was a lot of companies, bigger companies that decided not to come, and then that left a bunch of holes for smaller companies. So there was actually a lot more kind of varied and interesting things, I think, this year.
And the one of the companies we talked to, they said they actually did better sales this year.
Yes, one of the bigger companies, actually, one of the companies that we work with here at Milcan, that we talked a little bit with them, and they said that that they actually had better sales than
which
2019.
Is good. I mean, to be fair, I think they also have a lot more games this year than
they've cranked out a whole bunch of stuff recently.
Of really good stuff. But but at the same time, when you have less to spread around, I mean, when we went to Reno, there was less, but we felt it was almost better because it was more focused on the ones that were there. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you had to mask up everywhere, and pretty much, and like there was kind of a spot that was sort of away from every place else, where if you were going to sit and kind of eat, there wasn't really much in the way of concessions open, but there was one place open, and so you're supposed to go over there and do that. But otherwise, I mean, it was really surprisingly good. I guess on the first day there were some troublemakers that showed up that potentially weren't even gamers,
right?
And came in and then started a thing, and then. But I mean, we're talking about 4 people who came in together. But for the most part, everybody was pretty good that way. So that was really
good.
But I stayed with a group of guys that I usually stay with. There were 8 of us in the hotel room. Now, you may say, well, gosh, that sounds like a horror show, but it was a really big hotel room.
Right, this is the presidential suite, right?
Yeah, we split the presidential suite 8 ways, which is actually quite reasonably priced, as it turns out when you do that. And, so it was in one of the hotels, I forget, it's a Hilton, Hyatt, something, I don't know. I know how to get there, I just don't remember which one it's called. But that was good. yeah, I bought some things. I didn't buy a ton of stuff. I bought a T-shirt. I bought some miniatures from Malifaux that'll work really well for Rain in Hell.
Nice.
I bought some other knickknacks and stuff. Like I bought a 3D printed robot that I saw that was like, oh, this is really cool. And then I was like, how much is this? And he's like, $15. And it was like, it's big. It's probably, I don't know, it's 5 inches tall. And I didn't have to build it either because it's all one piece. And
Monster Fight Club was offering some stuff that they didn't sell out at Gen Con, the little claptrap guy
because
from Borderlands.
They announced they're making a skirmish game based off of the Borderlands video game.
Yeah, so I got the claptrap for $5.
Nice.
Which I was like, oh, cool. I don't know what I'll use them for yet, but now I have them. We'll find a use.
I got 2 of those.
Nice.
But it's really interesting because I learned about the process.
Okay.
So it's injection molded plastic, which is normal for miniatures these days. But it was made in America.
Very nice, yeah.
Yeah, and it was not made with a steel mold. That's the interesting thing.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, so it's this new process called SIO casting, which is spelled SIO.
Okay.
Casting. And what it is it uses regular rubber molds, but there's some sort of other process, and it uses like what they call an RTV mold, which I think the R is for rubber and V is for vulcanized and T is for Tony. I don't know exactly what T stands for. I didn't look that up. But yeah, it's the same type of molds that you would use if you were pouring resin models or if you were pouring metal models.
Yeah.
But they're able to use these molds and then injection mold plastic into it, and using this machine that you buy from this company that makes them. And evidently, according to, I was talking to John from Monster Fight Club, who's president of Monster Fight Club. He was telling me that these machines are, there's like 17 of them in the world currently, and they own 2 of them, I believe he said. So they feel kind of a little bit like beta testers, but still. They were making all these miniatures which have really high detail, really nice detail.
The reason why I was like, I hopped on that right away was like last Halloween. It was one of the first ones they had done that wasn't like for Cyberpunk, like a Collection 5. They were doing like a one-off, and it was It from the movie It.
Sure, yeah.
And stuff, and I was like, okay, for $5, I'll see what the quality is. And yeah, he's one of the ones that I got nicely painted, and I mean. Yeah. Yeah,
no, it's amazing. It's a really cool, interesting process. The molds, instead of costing $5,000 to $50,000 depending on size, he said the molds cost them about. Now they're not doing big vehicles and stuff like that. They're just doing regular figures. But the molds, he says, they cost them about $300.
Wow, so that's why they can have these awesome things and not have to worry about having to sell 1 million of them and then not have to sell them for $80 a piece.
And not have to wait for them to ship overseas. Like I was buying, they were selling there also at their booth, the Cyberpunk miniatures from the new Cyberpunk Red skirmish game.
Yep.
And they came in these little blister packs where you got 3 models.
Yep.
And they were $20 for the models. So it's 3 models for $20, and they had a special where if you bought 5 of them, so spent $100, you got a sixth blister pack free.
Yeah.
So I bought a whole bunch of models from them because they're really, really super high quality, really great detail. And the only issue that I've got, and it's not that big of an issue, is that they're just slightly, they're like more like 32 plus scale.
Yeah,
a little bit.
They're slightly bigger.
So going up against like some of my, if like some of these models, if I'm going to use them in, let's say something like Space Weirdos or something even like Stargrave or something like that, against other Stargrave models, the ones that you can actually get from those people, like those guys are true 28, so they're kind of small.
Yeah.
So it'll just be like, oh well, these guys are just taller. Like I got a friend who's 6'6". It's like he's 32 scale, right there. So it's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we had a great time, and it was still a lot of fun, and but it was a lot of walking around and a lot of donuts, which is not a good idea for me. But I still did that for a while, and now I'm trying to be better. And but yeah, so that was that was a long weekend.
You were selling your game through one of ours.
Yeah, there's a local store here in the area that they always have a booth at Gen Con, and so I was selling it so people could buy it at the show because we didn't have a booth and have no plans to do so. I was able to work out a deal with him, so he was selling it out of his booth, and so that's cool. That did well too. Plus, I also talked to a couple of different. I talked to a lot of different. I don't know, industry people about our game. Like there was a group called the Independent Game Designers Network, IGDN. And they're like a network of like indie games and stuff like that. And so I talked to some of those folks about maybe joining their organization. The benefit we get from it for the most part is that they go to shows that we wouldn't frequently go to, and then they would sell our games there. So that would be good, that kind of stuff. But they also have other things like playtesting, stuff. And there's a lot of different options too. But a lot of the other features that a lot of these groups put out don't necessarily apply to us because we're, miniatures folks as opposed to, say, board game or RPG folks.
Right.
But still, being able to take that stuff to conventions would be great. So, conventions we don't go to. So.
Right. Yeah. Versus, spending $80,000 to go to a few more conventions.
Yeah. Tell me about it. Geez, yeah. Oh, yeah, especially these days. But yeah, so speaking of Reign in Hell, still working on the expansion for Reign in Hell. Currently, the belief, and I'm going to try my damnedest to get this to work out, is we're going to be launching it on September 27th, 2021. It'll be available on Wargame Vault. Yeah, I'm going to finish it up this weekend. And then
nice.
But it'll be it'll be available on wargamevault.com. It will be what we call pay what you want, meaning you can download it for free, or you could give us a couple of bucks or whatever you want. And that'll be cool. It's going to be a 6-mission or 6-scenario solo/co-op expansion, and you play these scenarios in order because it's a story. You don't just like roll and go, okay, we're going to play number 4 this time. You play them in order, and then it tells a story, and you play either with a friend, both of you working co-op, or you can play it solo. So I'm looking really forward to getting that into people's hands. And then lastly, I've been continuing. Honestly, I haven't painted other than on Twitch for a while lately, just because getting ready for Gen Con and all this kind of stuff, and getting the Reign in Hell expansion done. So I've been glad to do. Like, I got home on Monday night, like at 6 p.m., and I was streaming by 7. So I basically had some dinner and didn't even unpack or anything, and then was streaming. So I got to work more on the Chaos Warband. I like how they're turning out. So nice. That's fun.
Very cool.
But yeah. Do we have any? We've got some app updates too, don't we?
Yeah, we've got app updates, which is fun. We should have like a little jingle, like app
updates. There you go.
Or like there's gonna be like a Chili's or Applebee's like appetizers jingle that we could use.
Some sort of I get that.
Yeah. Okay, so GameFor Library Manager. I think we've like 2 or 3 episodes. We're like, it's going to come out soon.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's out.
Yes, it is out.
In fact, we're up to version 1.0.2.
Nice.
So that's had a few bugs and features done right away. But yeah, we've been getting some good feedback from several users. So I appreciate that.
So it's called the GameFor Game Library Manager if you're looking it up on your app store of choice.
Yeah, I found that unlike the original GameFor, this one's a lot easier to find because we already had kind of GameFor done, so it's like already kind of tied to our users. So.
Yeah, it took us a while with the original GameFor for people to be able to find it easily.
Yeah, and it was like, GameFor, do you mean Game 2? Or,
exactly.
Or Connect 4? Or,
yeah.
But yeah, we've been getting that. Some bugs that we've been fixing, some feedback on, easy features to add, and some of the long-term stuff. So
yeah, and the Game Library Manager, for folks that don't know, is basically designed. If you, let's say, are volunteering at a convention and you have a game library, it used to be like someone would come up and say, I want this game, and then you had to like write their name down or get their badge number. Excel documents. You'd see those at game conventions a lot. This way, it allows you to just scan the back of the box, scan their badge,
UPC code,
boop, boop, done, and then you know who's got what, and if they haven't brought it back in or if they haven't, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and it's all done through your phone.
Yeah, we're using a cool third-party library called GameUPC.com, where he has his own database that's also tied into BGG for information about the game, but it ties those barcodes to the game.
Yep.
So when you scan in for the first time, it will take you to add the game or have the UPC pre-entered, and if it can find the game, which all the ones that I was doing, it was finding it, puts it in there. We will be adding some additional features that he's got available that we can add, so that if it doesn't find it, or if there's multiple, sometimes game companies will reuse UPC codes because they're not the cheapest thing to always purchase.
Yeah.
It will allow you to enter it for people so that other people will benefit from it, or to choose, and then it'll get learn and get better. So we'll be adding that, but yeah, I was able to use it myself while I was debugging it and adding features on the fly.
That's true.
When I was struggling with an Excel the last time. So, I'm hoping that other people will find it useful. And it seems like so far the couple of people that have tried it out are using it. So,
and it's not just useful for people who are volunteering at game conventions or things like that, but if you're a person who has a large game library and you like to loan games out to folks and then forget what you loaned to who,
right,
this is also pretty useful.
Yeah, and it'll tell you when you loaned it, so you can be like, hey, you've had my game for 2 years now.
Right,
I
exactly.
have it back, versus like, when did he have that?
Yeah. Did I just send that to him? Time is a blur these days, so it's hard to tell. Yeah, but yeah. No, it's cool. And then we're also still working on regular GameFor, but that's obviously a much larger project.
Right.
We're in process on that.
Yep.
Progress.
And we've got a couple devs finally freeing up, possibly, although I've got a meeting tomorrow that might unfree them. But
sure. Well,
but yeah, we're slowly working on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll talk more as we kind of get there. Like I said, we might do some smaller versions of it coming out, with not all the features, just so that we can start easing everybody back into using GameFor. So
when I was at Gen Con, obviously, because everyone was wearing a mask, it was I didn't get recognized as much necessarily, just because it was you'd see somebody and you'd be like, do I know that person? I don't know, but so there's a lot of that. That being said, people still did recognize me or whatever. Sometimes I was wearing like my Pachow shirt or shirt with my face on it that had the with that drawing, which will be released soon. That all being said, I did have some people ask about GameFor and ask how it was going and stuff like that. So that's good too. I'm glad to see that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I had a pinball for the first time since February 2020 this last weekend, and there were some people there that until they spoke, I had no idea who they were because we all had to wear masks.
Sure, yeah.
And yeah, a couple of them had COVID hair still. They were I now have long hair, and I always had short hair before. So
right, yeah.
I was like, I didn't really. I thought you were somebody new because there was 3 new people that.
One of our devs just got his hair cut, and it was getting pretty long too.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
So
we have a question this episode.
Woo, that's been a while since we've had a question.
Yeah, exactly. So this question comes from Chris, and Chris asks, starts off by saying, "Hi, Matt and Adam," which is nice. I have a question that has been bothering me for some time now. Why do games get discontinued? I'm not talking about unpopular so-so games. There's quotes there, which I'm making air quotes. You can't see that, though. I'm not talking about unpopular so-so games. Looking at you, Rune Wars. Ooh, that's a hot take. Rune Wars was a game by Fantasy Flight Games that didn't. It was a miniatures thing, but anyway. There are games with a massive player base that just are not available to buy anymore. Space Hulk, Mordheim, Warhammer Epic, just to name a few of them. I really hope that you could answer it on one of the next episodes of your amazing podcast.
Ooh, well, she told us there was an amazing podcast.
I mean, amazing podcast right there. Boom. Yeah, sure, exactly. Yes, so the question is basically, why do some games get discontinued?
Even when they've got people that are playing them.
Yeah, I mean, it's generally, and this is without even doing any research, but just kind of knowing a little bit, it's generally capitalism. If we're going to just put all our cards on the table.
Yeah, there's not a lot of non-profit business or tabletop companies out there.
No. And when you're bigger and bigger and bigger, it's just more money, more problems, I believe is what they say.
Yeah. That's what the kids
it's
say.
basically it works like this, I'm sure, as more of a cost-benefit analysis. We could have 12 games that we're constantly trying to update, or we could cut down to 5, or 6, and then put our resources into those. I don't disagree. Space Hulk should always be available. Space Hulk is the game that I played first that introduced me into the world of Games Workshop stuff.
Okay.
And so I think that the fact that they make it and then they sell out of it, and then they're like, okay, cool. And it should always be available in stores, in my opinion, because it is a great gateway game. I've talked about that on my YouTube channel quite frequently. It's a great gateway game getting people into the hobby. Mordheim is a little bit more in depth. Warhammer Epic is also, both of those games are very, what do you call it? More focused, I think, because they're not necessarily gateway. They're more regular miniature games in that situation. There are great gateway games to get into RPGs. I saw I remember at one point walking by I don't know if it was somebody advertising the new expansion to Onward or whatever that game is called. The RPG for
Tales
Onward.
of Yore.
Tales of Yore, yeah. So, that kind of stuff. Like that's a good gateway to get people in, but like like Dungeon Crawl Classics is not necessarily for your beginner sometimes.
Right.
So, but those types of games are also generally handled by smaller companies.
Right.
When you're a big company like Games Workshop or like Hasbro, Hasbro's big enough in comparison to Games Workshop that they can crank out a whole bunch of games. But again, like there could be a very popular game that all of a sudden they just stop making because they ran through it and there you go.
Right.
Sometimes, especially with miniatures, it's molds. Molds get worn out, and it's not cost effective for them to build a new one.
They go, well, we already have a big base. How many more people are really going to buy this game? It's not worth us to basically to do another run of all these.
And some companies are also finding that when you stick with fewer titles, but then constantly not reboot, make new additions
updates and
then
revise.
Yeah, revise is a good word. Then you don't what I mean. Like you don't have to be making all kinds of new stuff.
Right.
Like I can tell you that Vince and I for Snarling Badger Studios, the company that we've started to do, that we did Rain in Hell. We're planning on doing a new game every year. Like we're not going to be like, okay, well, we've made Rain in Hell, now we've got to make the expansion. Now we've got to make this or like. Well, I take that back. We're making an expansion, but we're not making like a new edition. We have no plans to ever really make a new edition. But on the other hand, also our game will never be out of stock because it's print on demand and PDF.
Right.
So
if you had a miniatures line, then that would be a different where you'd be like, okay, yeah,
right, because you have to get them made and it's a thing and there's warehousing
shipping
and all
quantity.
that stuff.
Like if you go and do like 5 games versus 5,000, it's a completely different cost metric.
Yeah. So I would have to guess that they've run the numbers and found that it makes more sense to not have games like Space Hulk, Mordheim, Warhammer Epic, etc. in stock, versus, again, I still think Space Hulk should be because it's such a beginner-friendly game, but Mordheim and Epic I can see being...
And it could just be that they wait till they feel like their numbers are up there to do another run.
Right, because to be fair, Space Hulk is on last version that came out was version 3.5, I think. So they came out with version 1 back in the 90s, and that's the one that I originally played. And there was a second edition. And then in 2008, roughly, I think, maybe, somewhere around there, 2008, 2009, they came out with third edition, which is the one that I bought then later on. And then they've come out with another, basically kind of a reprint, but with some slight tweaks of 3. And that's why a lot of people just refer to it as 3.5. Maybe New Space Hulk will come out in another couple of years, and they'll do it again.
Or do you think they're doing like a McRib thing too? Maybe that like
making games out of pressed weird meat.
No.
Oh, okay. You mean like doing it like limited time? Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Right. Like if McRib was always available, it would eventually some people would still be buying it all the time.
Sure.
But the people that only seem to be like, oh, it's back, like the Patty's Day shakes and stuff,
St. Patrick's Day. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe that's part of it.
There might be some companies.
It's a long play because, like I said, they haven't produced the most recent version of Space Hulk since 2015, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
So it's probably the other ones, but there could be some
definitely
companies that are playing that game of, well, let's wait and see until there's kind of a pent-up demand for another version versus releasing something all the time.
But, like, look at, Carcassonne. Look at Settlers of Catan. Like, Settlers of Catan, like, they know we got to keep cranking this out. They also crank out expansions as well, but they also know that they don't just go, well, we're going to stop making it now. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. Well, obviously, the board game space and the RPG space are very different from each other. Certainly. Right. The board game space and the miniatures.
Yep.
Although RPGs also as well. And look at collectible card games. Like, they keep making Magic, but it's always new editions and new stuff. So,
right.
It's the short answer is money, capitalism.
Right. There's got to be somebody somewhere that said, if we can make more money if we do this than if we do this.
Exactly. I mean, I had someone ask me recently why they make changes to games when they come out with new editions as opposed to just because changes in a game, big changes in a game specifically, like, for example, going from the last version of Kill Team to this version of Kill Team, can fracture the community because you'll have people that are like, I don't like the new one, I'm going to stick with the old one, me and my friends, and then these other people are like, we really like the new one, we're going to go to that. So this person was asking, well, why do they make the changes when they make new editions? And I said, well, because if they didn't make any changes, then why have a new edition?
Right. People would be like,
well, I got to have a new edition so they can get you to buy stuff again. Like that's, yeah. So in the grand scheme of things, it is generally because of money. Ways you can get around it, unfortunately, also sometimes have to do with money, but that means looking on eBay. Like if you're really like, man, I can't get Space Hulk from the website or from my local game shop, I still really want to play Space Hulk. Well, you can look on eBay, and you may end up paying a bit of a premium, but maybe not as well. Like I swear I have a local shop near me that has a copy of it or a couple copies of it still in stock. So sometimes just looking around a little bit too can help you with that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's, again, like depending on like when you're a small company, you can do things way differently than a big company. And when you use technologies like print on demand and PDFs and stuff like that, then you never have to have anything go out of stock if you don't want to. But still, to this day, most games aren't done that way. So I don't know if it was a good answer, but it's the answer that we had. So yeah. So if you've got a question, you can feel free, to...
Or if you have an answer that's better than ours, or...
Yeah, you very probably do. But if you do, you can send us an email at podcast@gmail... Or, no, podcast... That would get you nowhere. Podcast@IamGameFor.com. And you could send that, or, comment in the YouTube video version, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of options there. But thanks again to Chris for the question.
Yeah.
So today's topic, we're talking about how to become an advocate for tabletop gaming. Now, we've talked a little bit in the past about, how to get people into gaming and this kind of stuff. And this is a little different because it's not about, like, one of our earliest episodes we talked about, like, what happens if your game's not popular? How do you get people to play your game?
Right.
And that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about how to get people, it's a broader subject in that we're talking about how to get people into tabletop gaming in general. And it's not tied to a specific thing.
Right.
Though tabletop gaming has been growing over the last decade or so.
2 decades.
Yeah, really. It still does need advocates. It's still, it still needs, for lack of a better word, help. It kind of always does. People age out. New people come up, that kind of stuff. Back in 2019, and that's just some stats that I recently found, back in 2019, the tabletop gaming market, which includes role-playing games, collectible card games, board games, and miniature games, made about $1.7 billion American.
Woo!
2019, yes. So that's pretty good.
You're the king of the world.
Exactly. Except that same year, video games made $120 billion. So
that's less zeros, or
right,
more zeros.
That's way more zeros.
More zeros for them, less for tabletop.
Exactly. So, we're real small potatoes in comparison to the larger, specifically video gaming industry. If you took all of gaming, you got your video gaming. I don't know if that would like Vegas-style gaming count? Blackjack, poker?
No,
I
I
wouldn't think
wouldn't.
so.
I mean...
But yeah, we're pretty small in comparison.
Video game is the one that usually people are like, oh, tabletop gaming is going to be the next video game, like esports and all that stuff. They're going to like, there's esports coming.
Right. And here's the thing, is it's not a race to see which industry makes more money. It's not like we're like, all right, we got to get those numbers up on tabletop gaming. We got to beat video gaming. That's not going to happen. B, it's not the point. But getting more folks into tabletop gaming does give us current tabletop gamers many more benefits. The more people that are in the hobby, the better for those of us who are already in the hobby. Now, some people will say that's not true. They're like, no, because new people are going to ruin it. Those people are bad and dumb. So I don't really go into that, like that whole, because there's like, people talking about gatekeeping and all that kind of stuff, and I'm just like, I don't cotton to any of that. So yeah, the people who are like, no, we shouldn't let new people into the hobby. Or no,
we've done enough. Let's close the doors. And
no, that's the dumbest thing I've heard in a long time. So we're all about becoming an advocate, getting more folks into the hobby, and the benefits to the people who are already in the hobby, you and I, let's say, and others that are probably listening here, When there's more people in the hobby, there's more people to play with. That's a big thing.
And
right?
you might finally find somebody that like I can beat at a tabletop.
Sure, yeah. There's that. You could be like, hey, I finally found someone who's really into this like weird sort of obscure game,
Right.
or I'm just finding it's easier like at any given time when I've got like, oh, it turns out I got Saturday night free. I got nothing else going on. Cool. I can send out a missive, through whatever. Hopefully very soon you'll be able to send it out through GameFor to your friends or whatever and that kind of stuff, and then boom, you can get together and play Cones of Dunshire or whatever that you're going to do there. So that's cool. Yeah, and it's important, I think, because the more people that you find to play with, not only do you just find new people to play with, but you also find more people to like identify with. You know what I mean? Like the more people that are in the hobby that have these same kind of common, I don't know, experiences.
Right.
If like, okay, I'm not particularly into sports. So when I've worked in big organizations before, like you come in on a Monday morning in like, fall or winter or whatever.
Everybody's talking football.
Exactly. Everyone's talking about the games this weekend and all that kind of stuff. And I got nothing to really add to that, really. And I'm not really so, but every once in a while you find somebody who like, maybe they like the same video game you like, or the same like book, and you have a tendency to talk to that person about that kind of stuff. So getting more people into the hobby that we're interested in really just kind of helps people
you can
do
talk
that.
about it. Yeah, like 15 years ago, if you were like, oh, I played D&D, people were like, what's that?
Right. Or they were like,
Dragons.
oh, so you're a Satanist.
They're like, like, oh, that thing from the 80s? And like, that killed Tom Hanks? No.
Tom Hanks is still alive and well, thanks. But yeah, he was in that.
But yeah, now you're seeing it on, in pop culture because it's become, you're seeing a lot of celebrities.
Think about Stranger Things. Think about with the nerds in the apartment.
Big Bang
Theory.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. A little known fact: if you type into Google that TV show about the nerds in the apartment, you'll get Big Bang Theory.
Nice.
Yeah, Google's pretty smart.
It is.
Just having that kind of commonality amongst folks, I think, does help a lot. So to try to get people into that stuff. Plus, I think I'm a big fan of tabletop gaming. Don't get me wrong, I still play some video games, but I am a big fan of tabletop gaming because it is generally a bit more social. So you get to meet more people, or at least talk face to face with more people.
Right. Well, the social part, in person, our oldest right now he's still kind of readjusting from COVID, where he's like, well, I talk with my friends and play with my friends all the time, really, but you're in your room. We're like, well, we understand that, but you still have to have like a face-to-face, like most humans still need.
You mean like FaceTime?
Well, yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
But yeah, like the in person, there is some like psychological element that needs some kind of social, like in-person contact.
Yeah,
as good as technology is, and
with some people, it's not. Admittedly, with some people, it's not for everybody. Some
right,
people
you don't have to go and sit in a room with 10,000 people interact with all of them and be the
There's a
center
lot
of
of
the
people that even 35,000 people at Gen Con, they're just like, that's way too many people. I can't deal with that, and I understand that. But even having a small group of people that you can play with,
or like one person that once a month you get together.
Yeah, that kind of thing too. And it's difficult when there's such a small pool of folks to pull with, pull from. I mean, that's again one of the reasons we started GameFor was because we wanted. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard from people who are like, I had no idea that my neighbor 3 houses down played the same tabletop game,
right?
Because we never thought to mention it to each other,
right? Because you just assumed that the other person didn't know what that was.
Exactly. So that's one of the reasons, and because of trying to get more people in the hobby, that becomes less of a like a stigma almost, which I think we'll talk about a little bit here, according to the notes. So the other benefit to having the industry get bigger because there are more people buying things is that it also gives you then more choices to buy because more types of games are produced, which kind of relates back to the question that we had asked before by Chris. If there were zillions and zillions of people getting into miniature games, I bet you the Mordheim, Space Hulk, Warhammer Epic, etc. would probably still be in production to some degree.
Right.
Because you'd have so many people, like they have to focus on who's going to buy what. So they know that 40K and Age of Sigmar, generally, from Games Workshop, are going to sell well, and so they focus a lot on that. And they do some other things here. You got your Warcry, you got your Kill Team, you got your this, your that. But they, like some of those smaller ones, Adeptus Titanicus, which has got the... Well, it's...
Yeah.
In normal 28 millimeter scale, they're massive robots and stuff with people inside. But Adeptus Titanicus is played at a different scale, so those robots are maybe only 4 inches high or 5 inches high. That's a game that is currently kind of popular, but that's one of those games that I could see eventually they stop producing because they're like, well, But
it's not making X amount of dollars.
Exactly.
But yeah, think about a video game. If video games was making 1% of what they're making now, I bet you would see basically only first-person shooters and some sports games.
To some degree, especially from the big companies.
Racing. Right, from the big companies.
You're always going to have your indies.
Right.
Exactly.
But yeah, these other
big
ones...
companies would just be making...
Because they can't do the volume to justify the cost.
Exactly. So the more folks that we get into tabletop gaming of any kind, miniature games, board games, RPGs, collectible card, any of that stuff, the more products you're going to see come out that are going to be available because they know they have a larger audience to talk to, and so
they have a bigger pie to take a slice from.
Exactly. So I think that's a big thing too. Also, in theory, prices would very possibly stabilize at the very least. One would hope, because there's just more volume.
Right. So we talked about like the mold of expense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the expensive molds for making plastic miniatures. We talked about earlier. Like that's you. If you are going to be like, oh, I'm going to make only 1,000 of these, then you're probably not going to spend money to get a metal mold made so you can do injection molded plastic.
Right.
This new casting technique, and also just regular resin and metal. Like a lot of the reasons that people go with resin or metal, small companies, is because that's what they can afford. Those metal models are incredibly expensive to make.
Right.
So, So if most companies knew that they could be selling a lot more, then they would be more likely to go with maybe that kind of stuff. And we were talking about computers before. Like I remember the first laptop I ever bought was, I think, probably $1,500, and that was in like 2000 or 2001.
Yep.
Now, if you buy a laptop in 2021 money for $1,500, you're going to get a real good laptop.
Yeah,
like you could get a laptop for $300 that will also will be more powerful than the one that I bought.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? So yeah.
Technology gets better. Like we just talked about the thing that Monster Fight Club's using. Like if there's a lot of money in there, there's going to be companies that are trying to find ways to do stuff and advantages, and so they'll be coming up with more stuff, and it'll drive prices down because all of a sudden this producer, it's like 3D filament. I was talking to the other podcast that I can now get filament for $8 a spool when it used to be $25-$30, and that's just because volumes come down and more so.
Or volume's gone up.
Volume's gone up. More people are doing it, and there's also more people producing it. So now
and more competition,
supply, and so now they're all fighting to try to get that, and so then prices have just continued to come down, which is awesome.
Exactly. Which is helpful for us.
Yes.
And that's so volume, R&D, and other costs and that kind of stuff. It's basically the same thing. It's all kind of absorbed. Now, so those are the reasons why.
Yes.
But how? How do we do this? We can talk all day about why you should, but how?
I've been throwing meeples at people when I go down the street.
Yeah, no, I think that's helping. I'm sure that's helping.
Yeah, people are like, "Thank
what
you."
Is this? And then they don't punch you in the head or nothing.
They look it up on Reddit and they're like, "Oh, it's for a board game." Oh,
right.
Then I'm
that might work. No, it's not. So, how do you become a gaming advocate, a tabletop gaming advocate? Well, one thing you can do is you can teach your tabletop games to your friends and family. Now you might say, but hey, didn't you guys talk about that? We did, actually. So if you want more information about how to get your friends and family involved in tabletop gaming, you can go back and listen to the GameFor Podcast, episode 15, which is back in the pre days of the
before times.
Yeah, the before times. Yes, thank you. December 19th, 2019.
Wow, we were just young.
We were just so full of hopes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that you can check that out. But teaching your friends and family is important because, well, especially like with kids, because then they're going to go out and maybe if they start to talk about, I don't know, let's say Dungeons and Dragons, for example,
right?
Then their friends are going to be like, what? And then there's a real good chance that eventually they'll either get into a different group or they might even start a group of friends who start.
It's like Wayne's World. They'll tell two people and they'll tell two people,
exactly. No, I mean, and there's really a lot to be said for that. Not only is that helpful because, especially with your children. But even if you're like, oh, me and my uncle are going to start to play, at the very least, you are now again, like we kind of talked a little bit about the stigma issue, like people thinking, oh, tabletop games, that's weird. It used to be video games was weird, remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, and now like everyone plays video games. Maybe not
Right.
necessarily everyone sits down on their Xbox and shoots, Halo dudes or whatever, but everyone's playing even like phone games and stuff like that.
Almost every like movie, TV show, somebody references video games or like the main characters playing it.
Mm-hmm.
Like even now, like the mean tough group is playing. They're like getting off of Xbox and stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, my mom plays like video games. She's got some sort of puzzle game. My wife loves to play Civilization 6 on the PC. Just had to get her a new PC recently because her old one died. Just showed up and I plugged it in yesterday actually. And it's try and buy a PC these days that is not covered in rainbow colors. Like they're all just RGB'd out the yeah. And I turned it on. She's like, well, that's something. I'm like, yep, I know. So, so video games are not nearly as stigmatized as they used to be for the most part because nearly everybody you know plays it. So, you get more people in there, starting with friends and family since you know them and you can usually trick them into doing things. And that can always help, If you have a local game convention nearby, and nearby is
Relative.
It totally is relative. Like in America, nearby is a lot farther away than it is in Europe, but still. Volunteer at your local game conventions. Mm-hmm. Technically it wasn't a game convention, but you volunteered to run the game library at the tech convention you were at.
Yeah, and there was people that are like...
July or August? Or was it early August, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was late July, no.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it was... and it's interesting because, it's a fairly nerdy crowd, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And there was people in there that were like, oh, I didn't know about these types of games. And
right. You would just assume that people who are into like programming and tech and stuff like that, admittedly, there's still a high number of them that are probably into tabletop games.
Oh,
to
yeah,
some
there
degree.
was, yeah.
But the fact that, still you'll find people who be like, oh, I've never heard of, what is this?
Yeah, don't you have Monopoly?
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing, because there's still a lot of people out there that think when they hear, board games, they think Monopoly, Life.
I did for a while. Yep.
Yeah, but there's just a pro tip. There's a lot of different types of board games out there. Just coming back from Gen Con, even that there's a lot of different types of board games out there. Good Lord. But yeah, so that kind of stuff, volunteering at your local conventions, you can help run the game library. People who are going to the game library are generally probably already pretty, like they're walking up to it and they're kind of being proactive and know what they want to some degree, right? I mean, it's rare. Is it? Well,
actually,
I don't know.
I got a lot of the things of like, really like this game. There was a lot of recommendations. It also depends on your game library.
Sure.
If you have 2,000 games, they're probably going to find it. But if you have a smaller one, because you can only carry so much, or it's
like
a smaller
in your car or whatever,
right? Yeah. They might be like, okay, well, I like this game. Is there a game kind of like that, or what would you recommend?
Mm-hmm.
Or we don't usually game with our kids, but our kids want to play something. What would you recommend? And so having a working knowledge is helpful.
Yes, that's true too. Yeah, especially if you're volunteering with some sort of game library, having a working knowledge of games, because you will get that question a lot.
Yeah.
Think
of it. Yeah, it's kind of like your video game rental or video
rental.
Video rental. Yes.
Not that they do that anymore necessarily, but yeah, back in the day,
back in the old days,
back in the old times,
back in my time.
Yeah. And that kind of stuff. I mean, yeah, that's definitely helpful.
But you can do lots of stuff for volunteering. I mean, you could demo. You could help someone run their booth. I mean, there's ones at some conventions, because they usually run over the lunch period, where they just need stand-ins to run their store because it's one or two people, and they want to eat sometime during the day. So you kind of go from booth to booth, helping them, like, okay, I'll run your cashier for 30 minutes while you go get something to eat real quick.
Yeah. Or even just if you're volunteering for the actual convention, like if you're, helping to
take tickets,
take tickets, sell tickets, all that kind of stuff.
Merchandise, yep.
Yeah, all that kind of jazz. Like the small local run conventions always need some help. So
I don't think they'll ever turn you away.
They'll be like, no, seriously, we're all full up. We don't need any help.
Yeah, we don't need anybody to help us.
Exactly. That's not a thing that generally people who run small game conventions usually say. So definitely either whether you're going to go there to help the actual people run the convention, or whether you're going to go there to run games yourself, because they need people to run games. And when I go to game conventions, I don't go and bring like hardcore stuff, that you need to like already know how to play and all that kind of stuff. There's reasons to do that. Don't get me wrong. But when I go to conventions, if I'm going to be running something, I'm running something that's simple enough, or is going to again, when I go to conventions, if I'm teaching someone how to play miniature games, I know that the nine times out of 10, the people who are sitting down to play and they've never played a miniatures game before. Right. So I don't say, okay, now this is how Warhammer 40,000 works, because that's a lot of. Instead, I'm teaching games that are still going to like get you kind of in the door for miniatures. Big one that I love to teach at conventions is Song of Blades and Heroes, and it's a very quick game. Anybody can pick it up, but it's still got some like depth and elegance to it as far as like strategy and things like that. And people really enjoy once they get it, and they get it pretty quickly.
And also, because I don't know if all people know this, but don't just show up at the convention and figure you're going to run a game. Or
that's a good point. Yeah.
Reach out ahead of time. They usually have a volunteer list.
Yeah, most conventions have a schedule, and you need to get on the schedule and stuff like that. Or
so
whatever.
Reach out ahead of time. Don't just show up and be like, well, I'm here to volunteer, and Matt and Adam said that you wouldn't turn me away. So.
Right, exactly. No, yeah, you do want to reach out ahead of time. That's a very good point. Very good point. You can also run games at your local store.
Ooh.
Most of your local stores... Many local game stores are generally one-person, maybe two-person sort of situations. So if you would like to play more games or to teach people how to play games, and you start talking to the folks at the store, you'd be like, look, I can run this event, I can do this thing. That will allow them, because it's very difficult to work the register, run an event, and also like do orders, dust the shelves, like all that stuff at the same time. And I'm not telling you should go there and dust your shelves at your local store, because if you want to, knock yourself out. But that's not something you generally volunteer for. Yeah. But most gaming stores will be glad to have you come and run a HeroClix tournament if they've got a good HeroClix crowd. I mean, not all, but many big events or even medium-sized events at stores are very frequently run not by the store owners. They may be helped, facilitated by the store owners or the managers or whatever, but a lot of times they're run by, what are the games champions? Sometimes I hear them referred to at stores, like our local, or is it champion? I think it's champion. Anyway, so maybe look into doing something along those lines if you... or just want to get more people playing. Again, don't necessarily go with the crazy high-end stuff. There's a lot of stores that want to do board game night. So if you're like, I've got a bunch of board games I can bring, and the store will generally...
have demos and stuff.
Yeah, the store will also usually, not always, but if they can, they do like to try to figure out some sort of way to compensate you in some fashion, whether maybe it's credit or maybe it's free snacks while you're there.
They've got promos, maybe promos they've got. They can,
yeah. And that helps, too, because the game stores themselves are really important for helping to get new people into the hobby and to build community. I mean, it's really difficult if you buy all your games on Amazon to find people to play against. Whereas
and to know what games you're going to like.
Exactly, yeah. So also, while you're there at your local shop, you should also buy some things from them as well, just in case. It's a good idea if you want your stores to hang around. There's some things that you've done that I've not as much.
Yeah, so kind of in the line of running at your local store, there's also like the new like free. It used to be just free RPG day, but now like board game day they've done.
Yeah, there's like one that's called BG. I mean, because free RPG day is still a thing, right?
Yep. Yeah. Free RPG day, and now they've
also got BGX, which is the Board Game Expo. I think. Yeah.
And then possibly they'll expand even further. These are kind of like if for anyone that's in the comics, like Free Comic Book Day is a big day for comic book stores. These are starting to become big days for your game stores as well. They're trying to run usually as many demos as they can because they usually there's a set list of games that they're supposed to try to run.
Well, the industry actually sends the stores this stuff, right? Like
I think you can buy packets.
Yeah, but I mean. It's not just like a game. It's not just like a day where all the stores are like, okay, let's do a thing. Like there's a group behind it. We interviewed Steve.
Right.
And now I can't think of his last name. Starts with a W, maybe? No, Ellis. Steve Ellis.
I was going to say.
I was going to say Willis, but I'm like, no, that's not right. Steve Ellis. We interviewed Steve Ellis back last year-ish plus, and he runs BGX. Does he run?
Yeah,
he runs both of them. Yep. So that's he's definitely, you want to talk about gaming, tabletop gaming advocates.
Yes, he's an amazing one. Yes,
right, and that kind of stuff really helps for also getting people involved because it sometimes can be daunting to go into your local game store and just not know what's going on. But when you know there's an event and it is definitely aimed towards
new people,
exactly.
Yeah, I was running Stranger Things version of Dungeons and Dragons, and we had 5 or 6 people at the table, and only one was a current
player,
Dungeons and Dragons player. The other ones were like someone had played, back in the 80s for a little bit and didn't realize it was still around. People were playing it. A couple were like, "Oh, I saw this on Stranger Things, and so I want to know more about it." And and all of them ended up buying stuff at the game store and afterwards, which is awesome. But yeah, it's very geared towards new people, and so helping that out is a great way to kind of advocate.
Yeah, no, I mean those types of things like Free RPG Day, BGX, stuff like that. That's also Gen Con does their own pop-up Gen Cons now too.
Yeah, and when you see these things, also share them on your social media and stuff like that, because like we said, there might be a neighbor that's been going. One of my neighbors, once he found out that I was doing GameFor, I kind of explained what that was. He's like, "Oh, yeah, one of my kids has been talking about wanting to try out Dungeons & Dragons, but I had no idea who to talk to or how to get into it." So then I was able to go, "Oh, okay, well, this is what you should do, and this is where so just sharing that stuff
can help start a conversation.
Yeah, and they'll go, "Oh, now I know who to talk to about this," and so there's a free RPG day. Well, then I bet it might not even be them, but then they might go, "Oh, I remember so-and-so saying they wish they could learn how to do this," and they share it with them. And
social media is not all evil. I mean, it's mostly evil, but it sometimes can help it so that you can be like, "Oh, I had no idea that you were interested in that thing that I'm also interested in, and maybe now we can chit chat about it a little bit." And then maybe boom, you got a new gamer.
Right. Well, and then a lot of times these days, also, there's lots of promos going on and lots of like here's some sample RPGs that they're giving away.
I mean, they call it free RPG Day,
right? So you get free RPG stuff.
Yeah.
I know, I got a special dice for running the game, but there was stuff that everybody got that were, some mini rules and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Campaigns and
so definitely, do look online for that kind of stuff. I don't know that last year was really a great year. Well, when was last time? The last time you did was 2019, wasn't it? Yeah. But I suspect probably very soon that those will both come back. One hopes.
I know free RPG. Actually, I think it's in fall right now. So
I think they bumped it back because usually it's in spring,
April, May-ish.
Yeah, I think that's right. They try not to do it the same day as
Free Comic Book Day,
but Free Comic Book Day got pushed into August this year. So anyway, that kind of stuff is, I think, really also super helpful to get people involved with. I've mentioned the stigma several times, and the reason is we've had people talk to us and say, "Hey, I really like GameFor because," and this is a great thing to hear. I really like GameFor because I don't like to talk about tabletop gaming or share any tabletop gaming information on, let's say, my Facebook, because then my weird aunt will see it. And
my weird aunt will think I'm worshiping Satan and then send a priest at my house and
that. And you don't need that. I mean, the priest is probably a nice person, but so. Another good way to be a tabletop gaming advocate is to talk about your hobby, but of course, as we all need to know sometimes, don't overdo it.
Yeah,
that's really
and
I understand. You go to gaming conventions like a big one like Gen Con, and you'll be standing in line waiting to get a hot dog or something like that, and someone's going to see a button on your backpack, and then they're going to talk to you about that thing and maybe go too far and talk too long and whatever, and you're like, I'm just trying to eat a hot dog, I mean, and that's we've all bumped into that with not even just with that, but sports. It's the same type of thing. Anything that has an interest,
right? Especially if they're not interested in it, they might go, okay, yep, I get it,
right?
Now I'm done.
So normalizing it in some fashion by kind of letting people know and not keeping it, hidden necessarily.
Right. You can say, "Oh, I went to Gen Con this weekend."
Sure.
And they say, "Well, what's Gen Con?" Like, "Oh, it's for tabletop games, like da 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 da."
Exactly.
And there's a lot, and let them drive it. But if they're like, "Oh, okay," then you can just be like,
then don't do a dissertation. I mean, just be like, okay, that's person's. But then if they're like, well, what does that mean? Like, how does this happen?
Right.
I had a guy that I worked with at a previous company who I mentioned what I was doing with like tabletop wargaming and stuff like that, and he was like, "So it's a video game?" I'm like, "No, it's like on a tabletop." That's why, I'm like, and he's like, "Well, I don't know." And so I was showing pictures, and like literally, it took a long time for me to get him across the idea that that's what this was like. You know what I mean? Like he's like, "But so what? I don't understand." And if you're just kind of patient, and if they're like asking questions, keep answering.
Oh yeah, don't be like, "Well, that's enough." No,
yeah, exactly.
But,
if they're asking questions, answer.
Let them drive it.
But don't just be like, "Okay, so then."
I rolled a 6 and a 2.
Right. So then the emperor said, that kind of thing or whatever. I mean, that's not necessarily stuff that's not people are interested in unless, again, they ask. But, I mean, I think the more people that start to talk about tabletop gaming, I got a friend that owns a comic shop, and he has said, I don't know if it happens anymore because the show's not on TV anymore, I don't think, unless maybe it's in reruns. But when Big Bang Theory was in its heyday, right. He said he had nearly every day he would have a person walk into his game store or his comic book store and look around and be like, "Wow, this is really cool. I've never been in a comic book store before, but I watch Big Bang Theory, and I know that they go to the comic store a lot, so I just wanted to see what it was like." So that kind of thing can help normalize and put things out there and make people more interested, hopefully, in the topic of tabletop gaming. Also, if you are playing to someone, it's okay to lose. You shouldn't crush newbies.
This is a pet peeve of mine that just came up again. We were talking about beforehand.
Yeah.
Like, don't crush the other person on purpose. You're not going to be the grandmaster of chess
by beating someone who's never played chess before or just started.
Yeah, and I bring it up because my oldest just started high school, and they have a set aside time for club time once a week. So he had to join a club, and he didn't see much he liked, and then he saw the chess. He's like, "Oh, I remember playing chess a couple times with me," and he's like, "Oh, that sounds like fun." Mm-hmm. And so he was all excited that he was going to go play a chess club. He started playing on chess.com. He made me and my wife and my second oldest all download the apps onto our phone so he could play with us. Mm-hmm. And he was very excited and was starting to play. He brought out, dusted off the old board game,
the board
downstairs. Yep. And went to the first one, and someone crushed him and was like, "Yeah, you're not very good at this. You might want to find something else to do."
Which, number one, you should never say that to anybody.
Right.
Especially a new person.
Right.
That's just... It's a dick move in any situation.
Right.
Like, if you were playing against another person who's supposed to be just as good as you, they've been playing for 10 years, you've been playing for 10 years. If you want to be mean, that's what you say.
Right.
But, that's something you see on the Queen's Gambit or something on a TV show. But when people do it in real life.
Yeah, I saw a video this morning with Usain Bolt, the fastest person in the world ever.
Right.
And he was racing against Kevin Hart, and Kevin Hart had a head start and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And it was all in fun. You didn't see Usain Bolt run his hardest and then laugh in Kevin's face and say, "You're slow, you suck, you should never run again."
To be fair, I think Kevin's entire body is about the length of one of Usain Bolt's legs.
Yeah,
so it's not hard for him to beat him. Don't get me wrong. But again, there's nothing to be gained by doing that.
Yeah, if I go and play basketball and Shaquille O'Neal shows up and spikes it in my face and tells me I should give up basketball, and I'm 5 years old,
right?
That's the most horrible thing in the world that you could do.
I don't think that Shaq would ever do that.
No,
he's a nice guy.
Because he's a nice guy.
Exactly. So yeah, it's one of those situations where you do also have to understand that if you want to get people into a hobby, you have to teach them, and you have to not in fishing. Let's say if you're trying to get a friend into fishing or whatever, you're teaching them about fishing. You're not just yelling at them and saying you should fish and then running away.
Or we catching a whole bunch of fish and well, you're obviously doing it wrong.
You're obviously doing it wrong and you're dumb. And you're like, I just started literally today and I still got price tags on my fishing stuff. Obviously you wouldn't do that, but there are some people that do, so don't do that. Let's just say that. Yeah.
Help people. It doesn't say you can't win. You don't have to placate them and be like, "Oh, I'm going to make this move and unintentionally lose."
Yeah.
But be like, "Oh, okay," and if they're asking questions, answer them, and then be like, "Oh, okay, well, I'm going to do this." Maybe talk out loud as you're like, "Oh, because you did that, I think I'm going to do this because this will give me more strength over here," and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's important to try to educate. And then also, like, cross-promoting with other hobbies. Like, what do you think? Like,
Yeah, so...
like, obviously, if you've got a friend who's a 3D printer and you go to them and say, hey, I have a bunch of STLs of a bunch of miniatures I want, then they're going to be like, what's this all about again? And then maybe that's a way, that's a foot in the door, as they call it.
Mm-hmm. Like, I've been seeing, like, you know, I like on Instagram and Reddit, like, I started getting back into woodworking over COVID. Mm-hmm. Well, there's some people that are, like, have carved out like a really nice Settlers Catan board, and they're sharing, you know, showing it and stuff, and people are like, well, what's this all about? That looks kind of cool. What? And they're like, oh, it's for this game, and you know, you can, and they're like, oh, explaining it, and you know, getting people to go, oh, okay, I didn't know anything about this, and you know, I've seen it with, you know, at like crafts, you know, craft fairs where people have sewn up, and there's some like more geeky stuff.
Oh, sure, like dice bags and
stuff like that, but it's not like a gaming convention, and people are like, well, what's this for? And it's like, oh, it's for this. And
because if you're at a let's say a craft fair, and you see something and you know that your nephew is into role-playing games and has all of his dice in a janky Ziploc bag with a hole in it, well then, yeah, you know, you can maybe buy a cool dice bag, and then so that kind of stuff does help too. So working with people who make a craft that is related to tabletop gaming, and maybe saying, hey, can you do this or can you do that, and that
or
kind
if you're
stuff.
Good at doing something else, and then you know, but you're doing it for your hobby too, that you're like, oh, you know, I'm doing 3D modeling, so I came up with my own game pieces, and
exactly,
and then you show it off on your 3D modeling, you know, Facebook group and stuff, and then
it does multiple things that we just mentioned. It might get somebody interested in tabletop gaming. It might just help to normalize tabletop gaming because they see you're using your 3D printing stuff to make cool tabletop gaming stuff or whatever. I mean, there's all these different options that can help. The most important things about, I think, getting people into tabletop gaming is to just literally start trying to get people to play games with you, you know, but also that kind of normalizing everything. Again, one of the reasons video games has grown so greatly over the last 20 years is because they started making games that everybody wanted to play, and it's easy to do, especially if you get a phone these days, you know what I mean? So,
but without advocates and arcades and everything, and back in the 80s and early 90s, I bet video gaming would pretty much be
it would be dead. It would still be it would not be where it is, not $120 billion or whatever that number, 120 billion. So try to become a gaming advocate for tabletop, or an advocate for tabletop gaming, and get everybody you know involved. And don't ever stop. Maybe if they say they're not interested, then you should stop. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to, but I'm just, you know, don't force anyone. That's the answer there. Thanks again for listening to this episode of the GameFor Podcast. If you've got questions or comments and you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment below. If you're listening via your favorite podcast player, you just aren't into the whole YouTube comments section thing, then you can feel free to reach out to us via email at podcast@iamgamefor.com. You can also keep up to date with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and check out our website at www.iamgamefor.com. That is www.iamgamefor.com. Thanks.